The crystal spires of luminous prime stretched toward twin suns like frozen lightning, each tower pulsing with gentle waves of golden light. For 3,000 years, the Nexari had lived in perfect harmony with their radiant world. Their cities were built from living crystal that grew toward the light, and their people had evolved to photosynthesize like plants, drawing energy directly from their planet's abundant sunshine. Ambassador Lyrian stood on the highest observation deck of the central spire, her translucent skin glowing softly as it absorbed the morning light. Her people had never known darkness, never experienced fear, never needed to fight for survival. The Nexari were artists, philosophers, and dreamers who spent their long lives creating beautiful things and sharing knowledge with the other peaceful species of their sector. That peaceful existence ended when the stars began to die. It started with their outermost monitoring station going silent. The Nexari sent a rescue ship to investigate, but when it arrived, they found something that defied all understanding. The entire solar system around the station was wrapped in absolute darkness. Not the darkness of night or shadow, but something far worse. It was an absence so complete that light itself seemed to die when it touched the edge of that black sphere. The rescue ship tried to enter the dark zone to search for survivors. The moment it crossed the boundary, its lights went out. Its engines stopped. The crew's last transmission was a whisper of terror before silence took them to when other ships arrived days later. They found the rescue vessel floating dead in space. Its hull turned black as coal, its crew gone without a trace. The Nexari called it the Shadow Plague, and it was spreading. System after system fell to the advancing darkness. The Nexari watched in horror as entire civilizations vanished into the black void. The plague moved like a living thing, reaching out with tendrils of pure darkness that swallowed stars and planets alike. It consumed light, heat, energy, and life, leaving nothing behind but empty space so dark that instruments couldn't even detect it was there. The Nexori's greatest scientists worked desperately to understand the phenomenon. They built massive light generators, hoping to push back the darkness. They created energy shields to protect their worlds. They even tried to evacuate entire populations to safer systems. Nothing worked. The Shadow Plague consumed their light generators like candles in a hurricane. It passed through their shields as if they didn't exist. And when people tried to flee, the darkness followed them, spreading faster than their fastest ships could travel. Dr. Zara Brightweaver was the Nexari's leading expert on exotic energy phenomena. She had spent her entire career studying the strange forces that existed between stars. Now she stood in her laboratory, surrounded by dead instruments and failing lights, watching her life's work crumble before her eyes. The Shadow Plague was only days away from luminous prime, and she still had no idea what it really was or how to stop it. Her assistant, Kale, burst into the lab with news that made her glow dim with despair. The outer defense platforms had just gone dark. The plague had reached their system's edge and was already beginning to consume their outermost worlds. They had perhaps 48 hours before it reached the inner planets where billions of Nexori lived. In desperation, Zara activated the emergency communication array and sent out a distress call to every known civilization in the galaxy. She begged for help, for ideas, for any knowledge that might save her people. The responses came quickly, but they all said the same thing. The Shadow Plague was unstoppable. Other species had tried to fight it and failed. The only option was to run, and even that only delayed the inevitable. But as Zara prepared to accept defeat, her instruments picked up something unexpected. while scanning for possible escape routes. Her deep space sensors had intercepted radio signals from a previously unknown system. The signals were primitive but fascinating. They came from a small blue planet in a young star system, and they showed signs of a species that seemed to thrive on conflict and chaos. The signals told stories of creatures who fought constant wars, survived natural disasters, and adapted to the harshest conditions imaginable. They spoke of beings who had learned to harness fire and lightning, who had split the atom and touched the void of space. Most remarkably, these creatures seemed to actually seek out dangerous situations, as if they grew stronger from facing challenges that would destroy other species. Zara realized these signals came from what her people would call a death world, a planet so dangerous that only the strongest, most adaptable life forms could survive there. She had studied death worlds before, but had never imagined that intelligent life could evolve on one. Yet here was proof that it had happened, and these humans, as they called themselves, had not just survived their deadly planet, but had thrived on it. As the shadow plague crept closer to Luminous Prime, Zara made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. Instead of sending another general distress call, she crafted a specific message aimed at the human homeworld. She told them about the shadow plague, about the billions of lives at stake, and about her desperate hope that a species born from darkness and struggle might know how to fight back against the dark. The message traveled through space at the speed of light, taking years to reach its destination. But Zara had included detailed star charts and mathematical proofs that would help the humans find their way back. If they chose to come, she could. Only hope that these strange Death World creatures would hear their plea and decide to help. On Earth, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was finishing another routine shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Antarctica. The facility was built into the ice itself, hidden from the world above and equipped with the most sensitive listening equipment humanity had ever created. For 15 years, Sarah had listened to the whispers of space, hoping to catch some sign that Earth was not alone in the universe. That hope had slowly faded as year after year brought nothing but cosmic background, noise and the occasional signal from human space probes. Sarah had almost convinced herself that humanity would die alone on their small blue world, never knowing if there were others like them among the stars. Then, at 3:47 a.m. local time, everything changed. The signal came in strong and clear, unlike anything Sarah had ever detected. It was obviously artificial, structured in mathematical patterns that spoke of intelligence and purpose. But more than that, it was aimed directly at Earth. Someone out there knew humans existed and was trying to talk to them. Sarah's hands shook as she began the translation process. The message was complex, using mathematical constants and scientific principles as a base language. It took hours to decode, but when she finally understood what it said, she felt a world shift beneath her feet. The message spoke of dying stars and spreading darkness. It told of peaceful civilizations being consumed by something beyond their understanding, and it begged Earth, specifically Earth, to send help. The beings who sent the message had somehow learned about humanity and believed that humans might be the key to stopping a catastrophe that threatened the entire galaxy. Sarah immediately contacted her superiors at the Global Defense Initiative. Within hours, the message had reached the highest levels of government. Scientists worked around the clock to verify its authenticity, while military leaders debated the implications. For the first time in human history, aliens had asked for their help. The debate that followed was intense. Some argued that humanity should stay hidden, that revealing themselves to the galaxy was too dangerous. Others insisted that if the threat was real, Earth might be next on the list. But it was Admiral Marcus Webb who made the argument that finally convinced the Council to act. Webb was an old soldier who had fought in conflicts around the world. He had seen the best and worst of humanity, and he understood what made humans different from other species. When he stood before the emergency assembly, his words carried the weight of a lifetime spent protecting others. He pointed out that, throughout human history, their greatest moments had come when they chose to help others despite the risk. From firefighters running into burning buildings to medics treating wounded soldiers in war zones, humans had always been willing to face danger to save lives. The aliens were asking for help because they had somehow recognized this quality in humanity. To refuse would be to deny everything that made humans who they were. The decision was made. Earth would send a mission to investigate the alien distress. It would be small, fast, and equipped with humanity's most advanced technology. More importantly, it would be crewed by volunteers who understood they might not come home. The ship chosen for the mission was the UES Defiant Hope, humanity's most advanced deep space vessel. It had been designed for exploration beyond the solar system, equipped with experimental faster-than-light engines, and enough supplies for a 5-year mission. Captain Elena Rodriguez had commanded the ship on its shakedown cruises, and knew every bolt and wire in its hull. As Rodriguez stood on the bridge, watching Earth shrink behind them, she thought about the message that had started this journey. Somewhere out there, people were dying. An entire civilization was crying out for help, and they had turned to humanity as their last hope. She didn't know what they would find when they reached their destination, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had always been at its best when facing the impossible. Today, they would find out if that was enough to save the galaxy. The US Defiant Hope dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the luminous system, and Captain Elena Rodriguez immediately knew they were too late. Where the star charts showed a vibrant solar system with 13 planets and countless space stations, she found a sphere of absolute darkness so complete that her ship's sensors couldn't penetrate it. "Status report," Rodriguez ordered, her voice steady despite the impossible sight before them. "Sensors are reading nothing but empty space, Captain," reported Lieutenant James Park from the science station. "But that's impossible. The gravitational signatures show there should be planets and a star in there. But we're not detecting any electromagnetic radiation at all." Chief Engineer Maya Santos spoke up from her station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of energy field at the boundary of that dark zone. It's unlike anything in our databases. The field seems to be actively absorbing all forms of energy that come into contact with it." Rodriguez studied the readings on her command display. The darkness ahead wasn't just an absence of light. It was actively consuming energy, growing stronger with everything it touched. She had seen many strange things during her years in space, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Take us to a safe distance and begin long-range scans," she ordered. "I want to know everything about that field before we make our next move." As the Defiant Hope established a stable orbit outside the dark zone, the crew worked to understand what they were facing. The Shadow Plague, as the aliens had called it, was more than just darkness. It was a form of exotic energy that existed by consuming other forms of energy. Light, heat, electromagnetic radiation, even the binding forces that held atoms together. All of it was food for this hungry void. Dr. Lisa Hamilton, the mission's chief xenobiologist, made the first breakthrough. While analyzing the original alien message, she discovered additional data hidden in the signal's carrier wave. It contained detailed scans of the shadow plague taken by Nexari scientists before their equipment failed. "Captain," Hamilton announced. Her excitement barely contained. "I think I know why the aliens contacted us specifically. According to their data, the shadow plague exhibits properties similar to the exotic radiation found in certain areas of Earth." Rodriguez turned from her command chair. "Explain." Hamilton brought up a holographic display showing Earth's radiation map. Bright red zones marked areas of high exotic energy, deep ocean trenches, volcanic regions, areas near Earth's magnetic poles, and the underground caverns where humanity had built its most secure installations. "Humans evolved on a world constantly bombarded by exotic radiation," Hamilton continued. "Our cells have adapted to not just survive this exposure, but to actually use it as a source of energy. We never noticed because the effect is so subtle. But every human carries trace amounts of exotic energy in their bodies." The implications hit the bridge crew like a thunderbolt. Humans weren't just resistant to the shadow plague, they were potentially immune to it. "But that's not all," Hamilton added, bringing up new data. "I've been monitoring our own energy signatures since we arrived. The closer we get to the dark zone, the stronger the exotic energy readings from our bodies become. It's as if the shadow plague is actually charging us up." Rodriguez made her decision. "Prep a shuttle for reconnaissance. I want volunteers only for this mission." Every member of the crew volunteered. Rodriguez selected a small team for the initial probe: herself, Hamilton, Santos, and Sergeant Mike Thompson from the ship's security detail. They launched in the shuttle Pathfinder, equipped with every sensor and recording device they could fit aboard. As they approached the boundary of the dark zone, the shuttle's lights began to flicker and fade. Emergency power kicked in, then failed as well. But instead of panic, the crew felt something unexpected: a surge of energy flowing through their bodies. The exotic radiation that was killing the shuttle's systems was making them stronger. "I feel incredible," Santos reported, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like drinking pure caffeine, but better." Thompson was examining his hands, watching, as they began to glow with a faint inner light. "Captain, I think we're absorbing the energy that's killing our electronics." Rodriguez looked at her instruments one last time before they went completely dark. They had crossed into the shadow plague, but instead of dying, they were thriving. She activated the shuttle's manual controls and continued deeper into the darkness.
"What?"
They found inside defied imagination. The star was still there, but it was wrapped in tendrils of dark energy that drained away its light before it could escape. Planets hung in space like black spheres, their surfaces covered with the same energy-absorbing material, and everywhere the shadow plague continued to grow, reaching out with hungry tentacles toward the boundaries of the system. But most remarkably, they found survivors. On the fourth planet from the star, Rodriguez detected a faint energy signature that didn't match the shadow plague. It was weak, barely registering on their failing sensors, but it was definitely artificial. Someone was still alive down there. The Pathfinder landed in what had once been a beautiful crystal city. The Nexari architecture was still visible beneath the coating of dark energy, like flowers preserved in black amber. Rodriguez led her team through the empty streets. Following the energy signature to its source, they found them in an underground shelter carved from living crystal. 12 Nexari huddled around a failing light generator, the last survivors of a civilization that had numbered in the billions. When the humans entered the shelter, the aliens looked up with expressions of Desperate hope and wonder, Dr. Zara Brightweaver, the Nexari scientist who had sent the original message, was among the survivors. Her normally radiant skin was dim and pale, but when she saw the humans walking unharmed through the darkness that had destroyed her world, her inner light began to return. "You came," she whispered in accented English, her voice filled with tears of joy. "You actually came." Rodriguez helped the weakened alien to her feet. "We got your message. We're here to help." What followed was the most important conversation in galactic history. Through halting translation and careful demonstration, the humans and Nexari shared their knowledge. Brightweaver explained how the shadow plague worked, how it had spread from system to system, consuming everything in its path. In return, the humans showed how their bodies naturally resisted the dark energy, how they could walk unharmed through areas that would kill any other known life form. But more importantly, they discovered that humans could do more than just resist the shadow plague. They could fight it. Santos was the first to figure it out. While examining the alien light generator, she noticed that the exotic energy in her body was resonating with the machine's failing power core, acting on instinct. She placed her hands on the generator and concentrated. The machine suddenly blazed with renewed light, pushing back the darkness around them. "We're not just immune," Santos announced with growing excitement. "We can feed energy back into their systems. We can reverse what the plague has done." The rescue mission became something much larger. Rodriguez contacted the Defiant Hope and ordered the entire crew to the surface. Working together, the humans began to systematically restore power to the Nexari city. Their bodies acted like living batteries, channeling exotic energy into the alien technology and bringing dead systems back to life. But the real test came when they decided to tackle the shadow plague directly. Rodriguez stood at the edge of the Crystal City, looking out at the dark tendrils that covered the planet's surface. Her team was arranged behind her, each human glowing with absorbed exotic energy. They had spent hours learning to control their new abilities, to focus the energy that flowed through their bodies and direct it outward. "Remember," Rodriguez called to her team, "we're not trying to destroy it. We're trying to starve it. The shadow plague feeds on energy, but our energy is different. We're going to give it more than it can handle." The attack began slowly. Each human reached out with their enhanced abilities, touching the dark tendrils with streams of exotic energy. At first, nothing happened. Then the darkness began to writhe and pull back, as if in pain. The energy that had sustained the shadow plague was being transformed into something it couldn't digest. The battle raged for hours. Dark energy lashed out at the humans, trying to drain them as it had drained everything else. But instead of being weakened, the humans grew stronger. Each attack fed more exotic energy into their bodies, which they immediately channeled back against the plague. Slowly, inevitably, the darkness began to retreat. It started with small patches of clear space around the city. Then entire districts were freed from the dark coating. As more Nexari technology came back online, powered by human energy, the liberation accelerated. Light began to pierce the gloom for the first time in months. The greatest moment came when Santos, working with a team of restored Nexari technicians, managed to reactivate the planetary defense grid. The massive energy projectors that had once protected Luminous Prime blazed back to life, fed by human energy and Nexari technology working in perfect harmony. Beams of pure light lanced out into space, striking the dark tendrils that surrounded the system's star. The shadow plague recoiled as if burned, its hungry tendrils dissolving under the assault. Slowly, magnificently, the star began to shine. Again. As the light returned to Luminous Prime, Rodriguez stood with Dr. Brightweaver on the observation deck where this story had begun. The crystal spires were glowing again, their surfaces clean and bright. In the distance, they could see other Nexari cities coming back to life as human teams worked to restore power across the planet. "How can we ever thank you?" Brightweaver asked, her skin radiant with returned health and hope. Rodriguez smiled, feeling the exotic energy flowing through her veins like liquid sunlight. "You don't need to thank us. You gave us something more valuable than gratitude. You gave us a purpose." The news of humanity's victory against the Shadow Plague spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had cowered in fear of the approaching darkness suddenly had hope again. The mysterious humans from the Deathworld had done what no one thought possible. They had found a way to fight back against the unstoppable plague. But for Rodriguez and her crew, the real reward was simpler. They had answered a call for help from strangers and saved billions of lives in the process. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons, but their willingness to stand up for others when the darkness seemed overwhelming. As the defiant Hope prepared to return to Earth, carrying news of humanity's first successful contact with alien life, Rodriguez looked back at Luminous Prime one last time. The planet blazed with light again, its twin suns shining down on crystal cities full of grateful survivors. The galaxy was no longer a dark and empty place. It was full of friends who needed protection, and humanity had finally found its true calling among the stars. They were the guardians who came from the darkness, the light-bringers who feared no shadow, the Deathworlders who had learned to turn their harsh origins into a force for good. The Shadow Plague was defeated, but Rodriguez knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were facing threats they couldn't handle alone. And when they called for help, humanity would answer. After all, that's what humans did. They ran toward danger when others ran away. They stood up to bullies who seemed too strong to fight. They brought light to dark places and hope to hopeless situations. The galaxy had been crying for heroes, and Earth had finally stepped out of the shadows to answer that call.